It's my husband's birthday. I'm going to try to make something really nice for him. He wants burgers for his birthday, so we're both gonna have burgers. He's gonna have his regular grass-fed beef on a regular bun. And since I am gonna do whole grain, gluten-free, no added oils or fats, I'm gonna make a bun for myself. I'm going to make it with whole grains and seeds. So hang on. We're gonna mix up the whole grain mixture in a small bowl and let it soak to start with. I'm gonna use 2 tablespoons of each of these seeds except for the chia, in which I'm gonna use 1.5. Chia is a thickener that you use in a lot of baked goods. For the flax, I'm gonna use 2 tablespoons of flax. I'm using one from Great Value, which is from Walmart. And then flax, chia, and pumpkin seeds. Let me get that. This recipe actually calls for sunflower seeds, but they say you can use pumpkin seeds in the same way. They'll be really, really tasty in it. And I know I made something similar to this the other day, and it was bread, and the pumpkin seeds were wonderful in it. I will put the hot water in it, a 1/4 cup, and that's gonna activate all of these thickeners in these seeds. I'm actually gonna heat a little bit of this water in the microwave to add it to the seed mixture. And then in the other bowl, we're going to add the flour mixtures. So for this recipe, I'm going to use the flours that are suggested for the recipe, but sometimes I will substitute them if I don't have them. And if you make a substitution, just make sure that you know whether you're using and substituting a heavy, medium, or light flour. We're gonna start with the brown rice flour. We will also be using chickpea flour, tapioca flour, and psyllium, in addition to the brown rice flour. We'll be using 3/4 cup brown rice flour. Because I'm baking as whole grain as possible, I would not use white rice flour, if at all possible. If my scale was working, I would just measure these out in weight. I think that's a much more accurate measurement. She's saying 5/8 cup of chickpea flour. So there's 5/8 of the chickpea. Then we're gonna use tapioca flour. Most recipes will tell you to mix the dry things separately from the wet things. We'll see how this recipe goes. So I'm gonna add the hot water to those seeds and flax and chia, and just mix this and let it sit for a few minutes, and it'll get nice and thick in that short amount of time. It works pretty quickly. 1.5 tablespoons of psyllium husk, and I have my 1/2 tablespoon here. Pretty darn level. And 3 tablespoons of chia in this part of the recipe also. So let's just put that here in the dry ingredients. 3/4 teaspoon of salt. 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. This is used, of course, in this recipe because there is no yeast in this bread. And I was surprised when I made this similar bread recently at how nicely it rises. And it's the baking powder that does that. It really rises nicely in the oven. Just has such a wonderful smell while it's baking. You'll see when this comes out of the oven, it just has a nice crusty outer crust, and then the inside just really soft and really makes a nice bread. I'm gonna mix that up because we're gonna be adding the wet ingredients to these dry ingredients in just a minute. The wet ingredients will consist of some water, some cider vinegar, and the seed mixture to this. Yeah, I actually did this not too long ago, and it surprised me. It's actually a bread. Most baking soda breads, you don't have to knead them, but this one you did, and it ends up being something that I've made bread in the past that was a yeast bread that you had to knead, and this actually is very similar in that way, surprisingly. But most baking powder breads that don't use yeast, you usually don't have to do that. So it's kind of interesting. But I think it's because of the psyllium, and and how that works in with this batter or this. So let's do the water. Just says water, cup of water. I don't know if you're supposed to do this, but I'm going to do it slightly differently because I have these well mixed together, and I want to mix all the rest of my wet ingredients together first before I add them in. I think it'll just be easier than trying to do that separately. So now that this has, my seed mixture has kind of had a chance to thicken, which it really did, I'm going to add some water to it, the cup of water. And then I'm going to add the apple cider vinegar to it, because then the vinegar will be mixed in here equally, and then we'll put it in the other mixture, because the other mixture has the baking soda, and as soon as the vinegar hits the baking soda, it's going to activate it. And so I kind of want that to be an even process throughout that whole mixture of dry ingredients. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, you know, it's not like I am particularly, I'm not a cook. I'm not even a fake cook. So, but I guess that's from some of my disasters I've had in the past, that I'm just giving you some of the tips that a non-cook would need to know. Okay, this feels like it's mixed around pretty well now. Now the vinegar, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I just get the apple cider vinegar from Walmart, which is the Great Value brand. Once it's mixed, we'll add it to the dry mixture. A little extra there. And now let's mix it around. Okay, so I'm going to put this in here, and we're going to mix. I hope this works, because this, anyway, I hope it works. I was surprised the last time, so I hope to be pleasantly surprised with this particular experiment. Yes, so I have not been known for my cooking. This is looking great, by the way. It's a nice dry, holding together. And let me see what they say about kneading it, because it's pretty close to not needing to be kneaded. Oh, use your hands to knead the dough a few minutes. You can also use a hand mixture, and then divide it into 6 parts and shape into 6 rolls. So I'll knead it just a little bit and see what happens. I think it's mostly, my impression anyway, is that it's mostly that you knead it so that everything gets mixed very equally. We're gonna do that for 10 minutes. You don't have to watch the whole thing. Hopefully we'll edit this part out just a little. Okay, I'm just gonna cut it into 6 pieces so they come out kind of equal. So I cut it in half. And then each of these halves, I'll cut it in 1/3-ish. And then each of these 1/3-ish pieces, I will, actually 1/6 pieces, I will shape each into a roll. It says at 360 degrees. It's a funny temperature. This must be metric or something. A baking sheet with parchment paper, just a sec. I really love parchment paper. It saves me a lot of work later. And the whole thing is, in what you're making, does it stick to the cookie sheet? And last time I made it, they didn't really stick at all. The bread didn't anyway. So I'm just gonna bring one of these together and make it approximately the shape that I want, because in this case, you know, these are going to be used for hamburger buns. So I'm going to pat it out, and it will rise a little bit. So probably like this, or a little bit flatter. I'll make it a little flatter on the cookie sheet. On the parchment paper though, it didn't really stick last time, but I am going to add a little bit of the tapioca flour to the parchment paper and spread it around just a smidge onto the paper. Spread it around a little bit, and that puts a little bit of that on your hand, so it'll make it easier to roll these out and flatten them. Looks like a hamburger patty to me right now. I'm gonna get a little more of that flour on my hands. Getting it all over. Let's do a smaller one. This feels a little smaller, but won't matter. So flattening these out again, we'll see what happens as far as how they rise. And that looks pretty good for me. We'll put those here, and then they're gonna go in the oven. You can also sprinkle these with seeds. Technically, it calls for the pumpkin seeds or the sunflower seeds, but I'm gonna use sesame seeds on them. And that's what they look like on the baking sheet. I actually have black sesame seeds that I can use also, but in this case, I'm gonna use these. These are from Natural Grocers, brown sesame seeds. I'm just gonna put a few on each of these, sprinkle them. And I'm gonna pat them in a little so they don't just fall off onto the cookie sheet. And here we are, I'm just gonna pat that in just barely. Hopefully we'll get a nice result with that. There we go. And it's going in the oven like that. I'll let you know how it comes out. So my timer is saying that they're done, although that was the minimum amount to cook them. I'm gonna just turn that off. And we could cook them 10 more minutes. They're a little bit on the light side. I don't want them too dry, but I might cook them maybe a couple more minutes. We've got a portobello mushroom with barbecue sauce cooking in that pan, and my husband's burgers in the other pan. So I might take one of these out and test them. We'll be able to tell in a second. Let's get the sauce. I used a little bit of organic tomato sauce, just a few spoons of that in a small bowl. So I used a little bit of that, balsamic vinegar, a little bit of mustard, and a tiny pinch of cayenne. This is very strong, this particular one, so I use a very small amount. But if your cayenne is not quite so potent, you can use more if you want. And I put it into a portobello mushroom. I've always wanted to try one of these as a burger. They're a nice size, and I've seen a lot of recipes for them, but I've never tried it, so I'm gonna give it a try with this very tasty barbecue sauce. My husband really spiced it up with the mustard, so very nice. And I'm just gonna put a little extra on this portobello burger on the sides. Spread it around just a little. Don't want it to be too dry or anything. And put it back in the oven. There's a little bit of water in the bottom of this dish. It's supposed to steam it just a little. I'm just gonna have him hold the camera for me. So, and I'll cut this and we'll see how it is. So you just kind of put it right there. This is a serrated knife, similar to a bread knife. So I'm just gonna do it in half like so.
Looks delicious.
I probably could have made them a little thicker, I guess, but this is the first test one. So if this is done, we'll take the rest of them out. Otherwise, we'll leave them another 10 minutes and probably eat this one. Oh, that's not bad. I think that's pretty well done inside. It's a little sticky, just a little sticky. You can see they have a nice crusty outer shell on them. It's a really nice toasty crust. And I'm gonna cut one, but the last one we tested, which was only baked for 30 minutes, it wasn't quite done in the middle, a little bit sticky, so we cooked them a little bit longer. The only thing I can tell you is that I think it's really similar to what you find, what you would find with an English muffin. So kind of crusty on, but more crusty on the outside and soft in the middle. Okay, should make a really nice bun. I'm just gonna cut one of these right here. It's gotta fit my portobello burger. So, a little bit little bit toasted right there. But I think this is going to be really nice for the burger. I'm just going to put my portobello burger on the top. I'm just going to eat it just like this. You can put lettuce and tomatoes or relish or mustard or whatever you want. But the barbecue sauce that we made is really, really good. So I expect this to be wonderful, actually, to go with my salad. So this is my no tahini hummus that I can add other things to for dressing. In this case, what I did was I added a little bit more garbanzo. I actually used chickpea flour to make a little bit more. Added a little balsamic, some extra lime and mustard, and then a little bit of garlic that I grated in there, and my immersion blender, mixed it up. And it's such a great dressing, so it'll go really nicely with my portobello burger. I should really tell you how the first bite is. Holds together really nicely. The barbecue sauce is excellent. The portobello burger is quite substantial with the bread and with the burger, and very tasty with the barbecue sauce that we made. It's delicious. Okay, bon appetit.